Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Who Knew? Well, nothing says spring quite like fresh flowers, and you can't think of fresh flowers at Westminster Canterbury without thinking of Scotti Arnest. So you're in for a real treat today because Ann Archer is going to be interviewing resident and WCR Flower Committee Chairman Scotti Arnest, who also happens to be the mastermind and the artiste behind many of the beautiful flower arrangements here on our campus. So we are airing this program live on TV 970, but we also have our live audience, and after the interview, we're going to have time for some questions from you. So start thinking of them, and now I will turn it over to Ann and Scotti.
Scotti, after all the times that we've been meeting and getting to know each other to prepare for this interview, I finally realized during our last conversation that we have the same first name. That you, in fact, were born Ann Scott. Now, take it off from there.
Well, yes, I was, and my family still calls me Ann Scott. So I answer to that as well as to Scotti or Scoots. Thank you for asking me to come today, Ann. I do appreciate it. I understand that there are some folks who've given up bridge games and golf games, so I feel that I'm very indebted to be sure that I hold their interest and make it worth their time.
Especially on such a beautiful day.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, very definitely.
So you were born in Chicago?
Yes, I was, and I have a very hokey sort of rhyme that I love to say, and that is that I was born July 6th, 1926. I weighed 6 pounds, 6 ounces, and I was born at 6 a.m.
So that's your number.
So I've tried very hard to win with that number, and I've never won a nickel. Yes, I was born in Chicago, and when I was 5 years old, my father had a very serious fall playing basketball one night, broke a compound fracture and long time healing. So it was during the Depression, and he felt it was wise to come back to Virginia where my mother was born and lived. So we moved to my grandparents' farm in Essex County in a little town called Dunsville and attended a one-room schoolhouse, as a matter of fact, for my first year of school. And if Lala Palmer is by any chance listening, and I hope she is, she and I shared a desk in this one-room schoolhouse. And I also remember our teacher coming in with a bucket of water and teaching us how to make paper cups to drink our water. And outside plumbing as well. That stands very strongly in my head. So then ultimately my father was able to get up on both feet, and we moved to Tappahannock, and he started building houses. He was a building contractor. So we lived in Tappahannock.
And during that time you went to St. Margaret's as a day student?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Now, what took you from St. Margaret's to Pittsburgh to college?
Well, I was, from a young child, interested in fashion design, fashion illustration, costume design. I loved playing with paper dolls and doing clothing designs.
I did too.
So that was my intent, and I really wanted to go to New York, and my father was adamant about my receiving a college education. I was young. I was only 16 when I graduated from St. Margaret's. Had a classmate who was from Sewickley, and she recommended Carnegie. It was then called Carnegie Institute of Technology. There were 3 possibilities, one being RPI here, then RPI in Richmond, Drexel in Philadelphia, or what is now Carnegie Mellon. So I went to visit her and looked at the school and fell in love with it. So that's what took me there.
What was Pittsburgh like in those days?
Sorry?
What was Pittsburgh like in those days?
Very dirty. The steel mills were going full stream, and You'd wake up in the morning and there'd be two little black streaks from your nostrils down to your lips. So it was it just was dirty. There was no way around it. But anyway.
But meanwhile, you were majoring
in merchandising
and minoring in
languages.
Ah,
languages, yeah. A lot of the male students going to school then, of course, were working on a 3-year schedule rather than 4. It was World War II, and they wanted to get out and go in the service. So that affected our attendance. I went from August to April, for instance. And then my junior year, I was fortunate to go to Chicago and worked at the Merchandise Mart with a friend of my father's. And that was good experience for me. He was a manufacturer's representative. So I spent 3 months living with his family, coming in on the train every day to work and getting to know a lot about the workings of merchandising.
which is kind of like an internship.
It really was. And didn't make any money, but I came back with a beautiful black wool coat trimmed in nutria, which I had for years afterwards. So that was a good plus.
Then you came back and became a teacher for a year?
I did. I had been away for 4 years, and I wasn't quite sure where I wanted to go from there, and they were very desperate for teachers. So I taught high school English and Spanish, and had 2 young men in my senior class who were older than I was. They didn't know that, but it was a good year. I missed a bit of the year because I had chicken pox for one thing, and a bad fall and flu, but I did get to direct the school play, so that was interesting. Taught English and Spanish, and I had to study every night to stay ahead of my next year's lesson plan.
Oh dear, that sounds familiar to me from my first year at St. Catherine's.
They were very desperate for teachers, so but that was good experience.
And then the next stage is Miller and Rhodes.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
I decided that that's what I wanted to do, was to come to Richmond, and I went to Miller and Rhodes and Thalheimer's and applied, and I was accepted at Miller and Rhodes with the understanding that I go through an 8-month training program, which I was a little indignant about. I thought I knew all that there was to know about merchandising, but I very quickly found out that was not the case. And I worked in every department of the store, from shipping in the basement all the way up to tailing Mr. Miller and Mr. Rhodes around from day to day. That was the top of the 8 months program. Then was assigned to an assistant buyer.
In what department?
First in the junior colony, and then in cosmetics.
And who are some of the well-known people you met during your time at Miller and Rhodes?
Well, I learned a lot from Milton Burke. I would go around with him to do the window dressing. So I really enjoyed meeting him. Of course, loved Eddie Weaver.
Oh, yeah.
He was just so remarkable. And Louise Orr, who was the Charles of the Ritz representative in the cosmetics department. And I would venture to say that there are probably people in the audience who might have known Miss Orr. She was a remarkable woman, and she had a method of mixing different powders to the specifics of the complexion of her customers. And she kept 3x5 cards on everyone that she served. And they would come in, and you'd see her with these different powders, and she would mix them back and forth and package them in the little cardboard boxes, and off they would go. She worked up until she was in her 80s, and when we had moved to the country, I got to come over and see her in all her glory, still mixing the powders at what was then the Heck Company. Miller and Rhodes had been sold out to Heck's. And I'd had a lovely visit with her, and she was written up in the paper on several occasions as to her expertise of being a wonderful representative of Charles of the Ritz.
Oh, that's it. Well, it's somewhere in here. It seems to me that you became married.
Yes. I was very fortunate to meet the summer after I finished teaching a very handsome young man who was at the time a lifeguard over at the Westmoreland State Park, studying in the wintertime under the GI Bill of Rights at Corcoran School of Art. But I fell in love, and yes, we were married in 1949.
Now, is there a picture you have to show?
I was going to say there might be a picture up on the screen that tells the story of the night we were married. We came out, the reception was at my home, and we came out and met. Jordan, if you got that picture.
Now, we need some help here, maybe.
There it goes. We met in the hall. I had been privileged to have my hat made by Sarah Sue, and I thought it was beautiful. And the suit, matching suit, and it had a lovely feather, which you may see. And we met in the hall to come down, and the first words out of my new husband's mouth was, "Where in the bleep did you get that hat?" So I didn't wear it very much after that.
So at this point, you found yourself as a wife in Alexandria, and active in the garden clubs, where you met.
We had built a home down near Mount Vernon, and I had joined a garden club, and through that association, I met the woman who was in charge of doing the flower arrangements at Mount Vernon. And she was looking for an intern, someone who would take over when she retired. And I volunteered to try. And she took me on, and I worked with her for a short while, and then she left, and I took over. And it was a wonderful arrangement in that I didn't have to cut the flowers, I didn't have to do anything but go into a special building with an array of buckets of conditioned flowers, go to the mansion and pick up the vases and bring them over and do the arrangements and then take them back. So soon after she left, one of the first or second days I was on my own. I was standing at the table working on this arrangement, and my boss came in, the head of horticulture there. And Mr. Fisher was standing there watching me for an interminable length of time, and finally he said, "Miss Arnest, are you all right?" And I said, "Yes, I'm fine. I'm trying to do this arrangement for the general's bedroom." And he said, "Well, do you suppose Martha was that worried about what she was doing?" So that sort of allayed my fears, and from then on I felt a little bit more comfortable about working there.
Well, tell us about what some of Washington's own favorite flowers and trees were.
Thank you for reminding me. Well, we did some research when I was working with Mrs. Guild, and we found that the flowers that he particularly chose for the garden were rose mallow and love in a mist and globe artichokes and oleanders and lilac and marigolds. But he was more interested in the trees that he planted on the estate, dogwood and redbud and weeping willow. He particularly liked weeping willow, and then he grew hemp, which was used for making rope and the sail canvases. So that was a good to learn that, and gave a better feeling about what we were working with.
And then came a second home and children.
Yes, we had 2 children during the time we were building the home, and Phil started, by then he had his own advertising company, and along came 1974 or thereabouts, And I had met a very lovely woman who became a close friend, and she invited me to go to Bucks County, Pennsylvania, to see a shop that was being run by a friend of hers. It was a Christmas operation in her home. So we went and visited and were very fascinated with what was going on in her world and how she was handling it. It was sort of like a woman's exchange in that it was a lot of consigners doing handwork. And on the way home, Sally said, "Scotti, what do you think about our trying to do this in Alexandria?" She said, "You have talents, I have. We have friends who are creative and have run out of friends and family to give their talents to. Do you think we could do this?" Mm-hmm. So she talked to her family, and I talked to mine, and we decided we'd give it a try. So we spent from then, which was December of that year, to the next December, getting the house prepared. We had to put in shelving and a downstairs bathroom in my home, which was more appropriate parking-wise than hers. We lived on a very large cul-de-sac, so it made sense to have it there. We contacted as many consigners as we could think of, and through word of mouth, we're getting more and more people to say they would be interested in our selling their wares and taking a certain percentage of discount. And because we wanted to do certain things ourselves and buy materials with which to work, I called the county and asked them if I could have a tax number. And the gentleman to whom I spoke said, "No, you're living in a residential area. I can't give you a tax number, but why don't you just handle it like a glorified garage sale, since you're only going to do it for 2 weeks."
Sort of a Christmas garage sale.
Yes. So that's what we did. I canvassed the neighborhood to be sure they were in agreement, particularly right around in that area, because I didn't want them to be disturbed by traffic.
Yeah.
We couldn't do any formal advertising, but we sent letters to all of the organizations in Alexandria and thereabouts, Fairfax County, telling them that this was going to take place. And so we opened on the week after Thanksgiving, I believe, thereabouts. And the shop opened on a beautiful day. I remember Sally was so excited because she had asked her nanny to come from Newport News and bring her well-known cheese biscuits for us to serve and some spiced tea out in the patio. It was a lovely day, so we could do that. So we were open for a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of that week. Purposely closed on Sunday, of course, and Monday, and we're busy stocking shelves, and I was making some more boxwood wreaths, which we sold. And there was a knock at the door. I answered it, and it was a man from Fairfax County serving us with a notice of violation.
Of what?
Yeah. If we were to open the doors the next day, we would be liable for a fine and maybe 30 days in jail.
Merry Christmas. Mm-hmm. So what did you do?
I went back downstairs, and Sally and I sat in the middle of the floor and cried a little bit. And with that, in came my next-door neighbor, and she said, "What in the world is going on?" And we told her, and she said, "Well, give me a few minutes. I may have a solution for this." So she was gone about a half an hour, and she came back in with a gentleman who owned a furniture store out on US 1. He allowed us how he was not having very good business, and he would like to invite us to come. He would make space for us in the back of his store and give us an opportunity to use any materials that we wanted and set up shop. and he wouldn't charge us anything.
Wow.
So with the help of friends and what we called then station wagons, now you know what they are, but anyway, we moved what we
Everything.
had taken 9 months to prepare in my house, got moved, and with that we're able to advertise. And we had the local newspaper with big headlines, local entrepreneurs foiled by the county.
Oh, that's
which was
wonderful.
All this great advertising. So we had a successful venture for that year. Then the next spring, the same fella called. He said, "What are you going to do this coming year for your Christmas shop?" And I said, "Well, John, I don't know. I'm sorry, but we don't have any place to go." And he said, "Well, I have another furniture store over in another section called Del Rey, and I'll give you the front 3 windows if you'd like to join me." So that's what we did the second year. That was a big mistake on his part because he didn't get as much traffic in his store. They'd come in the front door and walk right to the right into the 3 windows.
Instead of going to the back.
Yes. Yeah. But that was second year. The third year, we moved into an antique shop in Old Town. And then the final year into what was the permanent location. That was in Crilly Warehouse, which was a restored warehouse on Lee Street, right near the torpedo factory. So it was a good section of Old Town. And there were lots of interesting shops in the warehouse. The one next door was a lingerie shop called Slightly Laced. And next to that was an antique shop. And the owner of that was very kind to let us use props from her store as part of our store. There was a vintage dress shop upstairs, but the icing on the cake was the fact that there was a lovely restaurant on the second floor called La Bergerie. And that drew so many people, not only from Alexandria, but from Washington. And we gained a lot of customers because they would look in our window and see these interesting pieces of whatever. One time we had a bathtub that we'd borrowed from the antique shop right in the front window, and we filled it with the pillows that one of 2 or 3 of our consigners made. So that was a drawing card. We had people like Willard Scott come in the shop. Ethel Kennedy would come in the shop on occasion. So we had some very prestigious customers.
Are you going to show us some of the
Yes,
objects?
I thought maybe it might be interested in seeing. We had a lady, German war bride, who made us, I know you can't see these, but I'm going to show you up on the screen the same thing that is here, which is a Santa. And we could not keep those in the shop. They were so popular. And then the next thing she made was a mouse bed. And there it's sitting right here, but it's also up on the screen. And the cute story about that is that she ran out of plywood when she was making the mouse beds. And she went to Heckinger's, which is like our Lowe's today. And she walked up to the counter, and the clerk said, "Can I help you?" And she said, "Yes, I need some plywood." And he said, "Well, what ply of wood do you want?" And she said, "I don't know. Don't you make beds for your mice? I need it for my mouse beds." And he said, "Lady, I don't know what you're talking about." So he brought out several types, and she chose that. Another thing we sold a lot of were Christmas ornaments. We had many consigners who made ornaments for us. And the same lady, if you can see on the right hand, made the little one that's the mouse bed that hung on the tree this way. And of course the the crab shell was the Santa Claus. We also had a consigner who made candies. She brought her candy molds, which we sold, and all of her materials, and she would sit there and make the candies and then box them, and we sold those. We also had a young woman who started doing her pastel portraits. She set up her easel right outside our door, and she would do a portrait about every 30 minutes or so, very, very rapidly and very beautifully. And she charged all of $35 for them, which was most reasonable at the time. In later years, when my granddaughters were of an appropriate age, I contacted Amy to see if we could come to Charlottesville to bring these children to have their pastels done. I found out that we did do so. We found out very quickly that she was charging $500 at that time. So we felt like we gave her start.
Yeah.
We had another woman who did special order pillows, and this is, of course, you can see was mine. But she also did other pillows with funny sayings like, somewhere in the world it's 5 o'clock, and nobody loves a smart you-know-what, and cute, just clever sayings. We had another consignor who did toe work for us, and you can see, and I wish you could see it too.
Well, luckily I've had a chance. I've had a preview.
That's right, you did. The trays and the wooden pieces, which were very popular. Whoops. And many, many other items. We went to Williamsburg and bought the apple cones, which some of you may remember you used as a centerpiece on your table, and you put the apples around it with greens and then the pineapple up on the top. So we bought those at the pottery shop and put more nails in them to make them more usable. We also, Sally and I, bought garden statuary, St. Francis and animals and things of that sort, and painted them with the paints which resulted in the Salterini finish, which was very popular. So we had a multitude of materials.
A change is about to come in your life.
Yep.
As you move to Northern Neck. But before we make that change, I just want to say how aware I've been while you're talking of how many other people besides yourself have been involved in every single project along the way. Friends, neighbors, acquaintances, how a whole world of people have cooperated to the projects that you have started.
Made my life so interesting. Yes, very definitely.
Well, let's move to the Northern Neck now.
All right, okay. In 1986, my husband decided that he would retire. And Sally's husband was of the same inclination. So we sold the shop to two delightful young women who carried it on for a while and even brought it to the Bazaar here in Richmond a couple of times. And yes, we did move to the Northern Neck, and Phil had one session at Cleveland Clinic with open heart surgery, and it just seemed time to move along. And we found a wonderful cottage in Kinsale on the Yokomico River.
Oh.
And we added a studio for Phil because he decided that he would explore his initial interest, which was fine arts. And he was very successful. He sold over 200 paintings during the 20 years that we lived down there. We did a lot of wildlife shows. We went to Easton, and we went to many, many different places, and that was the source of his selling his work. I'll show you some of his paintings.
Oh, good.
There are a couple of them. And there's another one. He was an avid hunter, so he thoroughly enjoyed painting ducks and geese, and boats, very interested in oyster boats and buy boats. schooners and things of that sort. This is a print of a painting that he did, and it was done for a particular time in the in Kinsale when they were celebrating the 200th anniversary of the post office there in Kinsale. And it was a great day of all sorts of booths, and I think we sold about 100 of his prints that day. He had 250 prints made, and they're all gone now. There's one even in the Kinsale Museum in Ireland.
Oh.
And there's the steamer off in the distance there, which was the Northumberland, and that used to carry passengers from Baltimore down the Potomac. And then the other one is the schooner, the Columbia FC, which was built, it was unloading freight there, because Phil went to the Mariners Museum in Newport News and did a lot of research on what they envisioned the dock and that area to look like in the 1900s. So that was a very popular one of his prints. We also, during those 20 years, took a lot of trips, one of which was to Greece and Turkey, and that's a picture of us getting on the ship to do the island part of the Greece trip. We enjoyed England and Alaska. We went to Denali. Phil was very disappointed that he didn't get to see many animals when we were in Denali. We found out later, the time we took the bus trip through the Denali area, all the animals were slumbering, so we missed out on that.
Well, you probably weren't there when my son was a guide to the summit of Denali. So he'll be interested to know that you were there as well. Animals or no animals.
We purchased a kayak, a double-seater kayak, and had many wonderful jaunts around the creeks of that area looking for eagles and osprey, and we had a resident heron who came every night and perched on our dock to do his fishing. Ann Freeman, who may or may not be here or may be watching, and I lived across the creek from each other, and we would travel back and forth and visit in our kayaks. And Mary Chester Griffith lived right up the road from us, and we got together for tea almost every afternoon. So that was part of the special memories of living in the Northern Neck. I joined the Garden Club of the Northern Neck and became involved in that and did some church work, and Phil also. And through my interest in church work, I was able to attend two of the national conventions in Indianapolis and Denver, and was the diocesan coordinator for the United Thank Offering. Which led me to have to come to Richmond to work with the committee to decide how all of the monies from those collections was to be apportioned out. And through that, got to work with Ben Harmon. And I'm sure some of you will remember Ben when he was here. So that was a real treat
I bet it was.
to get to know him. Well, all of those were local activities. I helped out in a local herb garden doing arrangements, dried arrangements, for the lady who owned that shop. And I think probably the highlight of the later years there was the fact that we gained two very beautiful young granddaughters. And their mother is somewhere here in the audience today. My daughter Beth is here, and she and her husband would bring the girls down, and we would get to have them for 2 weeks at a time. First 1 week and then 2 as they got older. And they loved crabbing. So we'd go on the dock and do the crabbing. And I'll never forget one night we had the windows open in their bedroom, and the cicadas started. And it frightened them so. They both came running into our bedroom, just frantically screaming, "Mimi, Mimi, what are those things out there that are making all that noise?"
City girls.
Oh, yeah. But they really had a grand time, and we tried to plan it so that they came during Vacation Bible School because there was some interest and activities for them every day in the morning. And then in the afternoon we'd have water activities. We had a friend who had a pool, so I think they have good memories of coming. And now one of them has a little girl, so maybe the day will come when she will enjoy going down there and visiting too.
Lucky girls.
They made some very good friendships. I also remember during that time visiting my mother here.
Yes.
Mother was a resident here at Westminster Canterbury. Let's see, I believe she came, I might have it written here.
86, I think.
Well, I think she came in 83.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure. I've got that right. I think she came in 83 because she was here. She died in 97. And she graduated from independent living into what was then Morningside,
yes,
and then on into full health care. And she was a very, very busy lady here. She and Kitty Bryant were responsible, with a few others, for collating the tales. And it was a collation then. They had a long table that they spread out with the 4 or 5 or 6 of them, and it was a process of collation. Mother was the stapler, and I can still see her sitting there stapling every single one of the tales. And she also worked with Sue Robinson in the Daffodils, so that was nice to see how happy she was. She was probably one of the best PR persons they could ever have had here.
That sounds like it.
She moved into the 3rd floor, and when we were moving her in, I said, "Mother, why did you choose the 3rd floor?" She said, "Well, I want to walk up and down steps." And she did. She really did. So that gave us the impetus, and there was never any question when the time came for us to find a place to go. We knew this was it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that soon after you moved into a new courtyard apartment at that point, the courtyard was fairly new at that point.
When we moved in, it was brandy new. I mean, we moved in April of 2006. So I've been here 16 years now.
And soon after you moved in, cut flowers started to appear in the courtyard.
Yes. Mary Alice Aiken called me, and I'm sure you all remember Mary Alice and Bobbitt, some of it, most of you. And they had moved in the year prior into one of the garden apartments, and she knew that we were due to move in, and she said, "I've already signed you up for some volunteer duty." And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "Flower arranging." So when we moved in, Nan Stone contacted me. And Nan was very active in the Tower Flower Committee. And she sort of got me started, taught me what was expected, and she and I decided where flowers should go, what 3 locations they should be. And she had also made an arrangement at that time with Coleman's florist, whereby she was taking glass vases, used vases, and getting flowers in exchange. She said Mr. Coleman had made the arrangement with her, or she with him, really. But the arrangement being there was no paperwork to be involved. The day that she took the vases, she came home with flowers.
Yeah.
So she started me with that. There was a room set aside in the courtyard, but there was nothing in it. It was just a nice room with a sink and counter space. So I had the pleasure of we had a little bit of a budget with which to work, and I went and bought some vases and started trying to get some help, and it took off from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a labor of love. I couldn't do it without Kathleen Pender, believe me. She has been just a remarkable helper, and she has been cognizant of the fact that there are certain flowers that can be used in our big containers and some that are not appropriate. So she's consulted with the flower committees of both the tower and the courtyard to be sure that what she's planning is appropriate for our use. And I credit her with that. And these are some of the just a few of the flower arrangements that were done in the courtyard. Just to give you an idea of the type of things that we are doing now. That was a particularly fun one to do. That was, I think it was for New Year's Eve. I'm not sure, but I believe that was when that one was done. So that brings us really up to the present as far as flowers are concerned. In the meantime, or towards the end of that time, I found out that I had breast cancer, so I had to have that surgery, and that gave me a little bit of a vacation. And Phil died in 2011, and then I had family in Charlotte and Oklahoma, so I did a little bit of visiting with them. And I'm very thankful to have some family and friends here in Richmond, one of whom was responsible for the mouse bed. Becky is here today, and she very carefully went up in her attic about a month or so ago and got her mouse bed down for me to show today. So thank you, Rebecca, for that effort.
And now tell us about your project with Weave.
Well, that's this last picture, which I was just getting ready to put on the screen. When COVID started and we were all groping for activities, things to do, my dear friend Nancy Jo, who is my right and left arm in the flower room, called me one day and she said, "Scotti, I think you ought to do finger puppets. She'll give you something to do." She said, "I know you're doing caps for the Salvation Army." And I said, "Nancy Jo, I don't have any idea how to do a finger puppet." And she said, "Well, I'll just go on the internet and get you some patterns." So she is responsible for starting me to make these puppets. And I thought, well, what am I going to do with them? So then I thought, well, why not see if I can make some money selling them? Well, I have. I've made over $2,000 for Weave by selling finger puppets. And I've had a grand time doing it. There's some of the local residents who have bought as many as 25 for their grandchildren, maybe one man and one woman. During Christmas, we did lots of Santas and Mrs. Santas and snowmen. I did. And then this past Easter, I sold a lot of rabbits, finger puppets that were bunny rabbits. So that has kept me busy.
And
thanks to Nancy Jo.
Are we ready for some questions? Scotti,
I have one more thing I'd like to say.
Good.
This is my final speech. And I have to write it because I forget it if I don't. My whole adventure here has been an amazing ride. There's never a day that I can't find something to do. I'm blessed to be here, and I'm well cared for in every respect, and my family doesn't have to worry about me. And the last thing I want to say is if there's anyone interested in liking to join our flower committee, I'd love to have you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that wonderful detail with us and the summarizing your special times here at Westminster Canterbury. We know lots more are here to be had, but in the interim, is there anyone in the audience that has a question? Just raise your hand and Jessica will come around with a microphone. Oh, I see a hand. She's coming.
Hi, Scotty. Am I on? Okay. Scotty, this is a little shout out for RPI. I was there, and Richmond people sort of looked down on that school. And are you hearing me?
Yes, a shout out to RPI. Richmond people look down on that school.
But to hear from Scotty that the only school she had to choose from, one of the three on the East Coast, was RPI. But the other thing I wanted to say is that I have had something in my bathroom for 100 years, and it's powder. And it's the only face powder that matches my skin. And some lady mixed it for me.
Some words, but not much.
Either Millen Rhodes or Tallhammer's, and it had to have been Mrs. Orr.
Can't hear it.
Oh, she was saying she has powder in her bathroom that a lady mixed for her. She's had it for 100 years, and either someone at Miller and Rhodes or Tallheimer's. So we're thinking there might be a connection there.
Say that again.
Her face powder that
the face powder.
Yes, was specially mixed for her several years ago, and so we think there may have been a connection.
I'm sure it's Mrs. Orr. It's got to be. Absolutely.
So
no question. She was the only one that did it. Of all the reps, of all the different lines of cosmetics, she was the one who mixed face powder. So you have a real gem.
Who knew?
Wonder if it's still usable.
Wonderful.
That's amazing.
It really is. Any other questions or comments? You did such a great job summarizing everything for us and sharing your talents and even having pictures for all of us to see. But I know we have all, throughout the many years, enjoyed the beautiful flower arrangements. And I know several of us have those finger puppets. I had to do a second order for my godchildren. And I've even seen some of them on wheelchairs and walkers. So you're a hit in all of the arts. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And so I think Anne has a few closing remarks, and then we will conclude our program.
First, I want to thank you, Scotty. I'm a non-visual person, as I've told you, and I have learned so much about how to see as well as how to make from our time with you. I want to remind everybody of the Memorial Day service that will be live at last this year on Monday, May 30th, right here in the theater at 11 o'clock. Then on Wednesday, June 15th, the focus of the next Who Knew interview will be Commander Connie Sirota's service in the U.S. Navy and the Korean War. Interviewer Susie Fraser will also explore Connie's many other interests. So see you on the 30th and on the 15th.
Thank you, everyone.
Great.